This team is in a unique situation from the turnover that just happened prior versus other places that you might turn over and see a legendary coach moving on. If we look at what in NFL history has been the circumstances of when that happens, you typically see something more akin to kind of what happened there with Landry moving over and Jimmy Johnson took over. It wasn't that those young coaches couldn't get success quick. It was that they needed to get the talent influx rebuilt back up, along with, of course, getting their systems put into place. But it was as much the talent as the systems stuff there. One could make the argument that the talent in actuality is more here, and that there have been circumstances in NFL history where new coaches come in and been able to still benefit on the back of having still some talent there on board to be able to push it forward. Look no further than the Cowboys when Jimmy Johnson moved on, where even though they probably had kind of a bit of a questionable coach for the NFL level in Barry Switzer, they still found themselves on a championship spot because the talent there was still good when they turned over. Or George Seifert in San Francisco taking over for Bill Walsh. Kind of a similar situation. And when you look at this team, the reason I'm making such a strong argument as to why the talent is really here, that this is a matter of, is the new coach going to be a good coach? Are the schemes going to work on both sides of the ball? Can they get both of those schemes instituted in a fast enough fashion to be a contender this year? Because that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm talking about the here and now. The future looks bright. I trusted McDonald long-term. I think he's going to be a good coach. Won't know for sure until he's out there, but everything they've done looks smartly put into place for the future. That future that may take that patient timeline to get there. I keep coming back to the but, coming back to that little bit of that but. Because a couple of years ago, your Seattle Seahawks made what will be looked at as a top 2, top 3 all-time trade in NFL history with the Russell Wilson trade. And I know many of you know this, but let's refresh our minds on this. You took those assets. You took this huge, mighty haul of assets, and you went out there and maybe had your best draft in NFL history or one of them. And this would not be an outlook of a Seattle Seahawks fan saying this. You can go through any litany of any draft pundits that you want to go through who looked at that Seattle Seahawks draft and go find me one that's shaking their finger at it, that's not saying anything but, wow, the Seahawks came away with a wonderful base of talent haul here. And I think it certainly has been proven to be that as these guys have come forward. And they came back the next year still benefiting from some of those assets there from debt, and you were able to again come back and have a very strong draft. Maybe not as strong, but very close to the same kind of similar level of strength. And this is with, when now you look at the roster and with this offseason kind of paring away stuff that's maybe not the best of money on the books, getting it all kind of sliced down in the right way, being able to still have the talent like guys like the DKs, the Tylers that are still on the roster that can still provide and be a part of this rebuild. And you go, okay, what if all that big bevy of talent that you have put together over the past few years comes together a little quicker than we think? Ascend a little bit faster than would seem possible. What does that mean at that point? To me, that means that the talent comes forward in a big way this year for sure, but I think that there's also some specific things that are going to occur or would have to occur for this season to become a winner. There'd have to be these, to me, exact kind of items that would have to go on, or at least a majority of these specific items would need to kind of happen for me to see this team getting to that contending state this season, the here and the now, not having to wait that extra year. There's obviously other alternative ways too, where you could have 5 guys turn into all pros suddenly, but that's hard to predict. And there is certainly a potential that could happen with this team and that young talent I just talked about. But I'm going to reach to more specific things and say it more as this happens as a good thing, this happens as a good thing, that happens as a good thing. The way that all bears out downwind is a team that can contend versus this was great, and that was great, and that was great, and that's how the team contended. Because I think it'll be more of that, and this is a bit in the way that John Schneider has built this past couple of years in drafting really well, signing pretty good contracts of good value, not really having anybody that's you're being taken over the knee on any of these contracts. We're not getting, last couple of years prior, you were kind of feeling on a few of them like, are we getting kind of paddled on this one, or this feels? But not this year as much. And so things are pretty clear and clean, but let's look at a couple of specific things that I think would need to go on. And I'll love to hear your guys' thoughts on this as well. And if you guys are buying into this, for the Seattle Seahawks to become a contender this year, this season, for things to come together in the here and now. I think if all these things were to go on, or a majority of the things, bam, you're right there in a contending state. So let's start with just the top one off the rip with this. Abraham Lucas. And the beginning spot I'm going to begin with this team is not by coincidence. The spots on this team I start with on this, if you want to put it by order of importance, you could maybe do that. I don't know if I put Abraham 1 here, but it would be a very, very important part that Lucas can come back and play this year. George Fant has been a very serviceable tackle in this league. He is getting a little bit older, but tackles have shown they can play. to an elder age. He has his various major injuries himself. He can probably do a little bit better than Stone Forsythe was able to do for you, taking over for Lucas if Lucas can't hold up. But you are going to need Abraham Lucas to be out there and steady like he was in that first season. When we look at the last 2 years and when the Seattle Seahawks offense was at its best, it was through that first 10, 11 game run with Geno Smith and the boys there where they were both healthy. Lucas's knee was feeling pretty good. Cross was on point with what he was doing. Then they kind of hit that rookie wall. Lucas got the knee injury, kind of bounced up a little bit. And you saw a bit of a dip in their performance to the back of that schedule. And then last year, of course, both of them sustained an injury week 1 that, in Lucas's case, basically knocked him out for the year. And then in Charles Cross's case, you have to wonder if he probably wasn't 100% coming back from that turf toe. But Lucas being able to be out there gives the Seattle Seahawks an impact player. This guy, let's not forget, was good from day one. He wasn't just, well, he's giving us flashes and looking raw. He was good from day one. One of the best starts of a rookie season I think we've had for a right tackle, going back to maybe, Sean Locklear, if you want me to go way back on the run on that one. So it's been a while since we had a guy that was that good at right tackle instantaneously. He comes back now, and he seems to be looking a little bit okay. He seems to be looking a little bit better. We've finally got a little bit of film here of him off season, doing his dead leg lifts here. Knees looking good. As Dan Viennes noticed with this, note as well that he's doing these lifts without any knee brace. I think that's telling, because when those guys have that, I'm still feeling some instability, I'm still not feeling strong, it's still feeling dodgy, you will always see that knee brace on there in conjunction with that. But you don't see that here with Lucas. He seems to be ready to come back. And if he can do that, if he can be one of the pillars on this offensive line this upcoming season, I think it's going to be huge for our Seahawks in getting to that contending state. This was a 9-win team. If you can get the 2 pillars out there, and that brings me to the second guy, which is going to be Charles Cross. You get those 2 pillars out there like you had through those first 10 games of the season last year. You get things in a place where it's stable now. The pass protection starts to stabilize down. You would hope the interior off the inside line can be as good as well, but this is more, in my opinion, I'd like to see the interior get better. I think it's going to get even just a little bit marginally better. But this is the place where you can actually have some very close to impact at the position. And to get that from the 2 tackles and how that can help a quarterback out, how that can steady the waters for Geno Smith to be able to go through his progressions, to not have to just have one time for just a one read and let it rip kind of throw, which sometimes you'd have to do because he couldn't trust his protection as much, and especially off the edges. And in these guys, you can not only trust them in one-on-one. You don't have to provide chip help. You got a spread system you want to bring into play. A big part of spread system is being able to send a lot of guys out to run routes. It's very helpful. You can have the offensive linemen that can both hold up on their own edges there to be able to get that done. And the point I want to come back to with both Cross and Lucas on this is that these guys are coming into an offense now that they both played in college. Both of these guys have a background in air raid. Both these guys have a background in spread systems. It will fit to their skill set. And Cross, he's never going to be a mauler as a run blocker. He's not going to turn into Walter Jones as a run blocker, but he is a really good blindside protector. Laramie Tunsil has always been my theoretical upside guy for Charles Cross, and I think he can reach that level. He's been banged on a little bit this offseason by some Seahawks fans and their outlook of him and thinking that he's been a little bit of a disappointment. I argue that he is not. I think he was fighting through that turf toe last year, even when he came back. That tends to be one that nags you through the year, even once you do come back. And because he's a lineman, they go, well, you don't need it as much, so you can just kind of suffer with it. But you got to feel like they're probably not playing at 100% when that is the case, and they're dealing like that as he probably was. He's coming into year 3, contract year potentially coming up. If he can come out here and do this right, I expect him to be in his best shape. And if he can stay healthy and become that blindside protector, and then we have Lucas on the other side, here's the beginning blocks to me of a season where we can reach to contention. And it's going to be on the back of one specific thing through the first 3 or 4 of these items. And again, this is on purpose in my opinion, because I don't think that we're going to be able to just ride or die on the back of the defense, hoping that that's going to be the single part to buoy everything up, that somehow they're going to be out there just running roughshod over everybody and the offense can just get by. The offense is going to have to be dominant here. And if you got 2 guys out there at tackle that are able to get the job done in the way that these guys are, being great pass protectors, but also great mobility guys. A lot of what you could see with Lucas in what he was doing with Washington especially was pulling back across the formation, a willingness to get out there in space and move cleanly for guys big as him and be able to get to his landmark, be able to hit his spot, be able to land that block. And Cross, very much the similar way. They passed at about a 73% clip at the college when he was coming out. So he was really asked to run block very infrequently within that spread system, but when he did it, he was well graded in how he did it there. So not that he can't do it, just wasn't asked to do it. Now he goes to a system. Lucas goes to a system that you could make the argument fits them very purely, maybe even more purely than the prior did. Next guy up, and again, you're going to see a trend through the first 4 on these, and that is going to be Kenneth Walker is maximized. I would love to see a cumulative 1,500-yard season from Walker between what he gets as far as running and receiving yards go. He's used as that weapon in this offense to where you get him in space, you get him those opportunities to really give him where he's not seemingly always surrounded so many times on so many runs. And when I went back and watched the All-22 and putting a video together for Kenneth Walker this offseason, I was shocked by just how many times he's getting the ball and he's getting hit, or how many times he's getting the ball and he could maybe get around this first guy, but there's the second guy right here, and the first guy can kind of use the leverage of the second guy to box him in. And sometimes even then he would get away. It was even wild then that he could pull it off, but so often was he being given those just clean, beautiful holes that he could run through and go and really, house it at that point. Go give you those big chunk plays, like the Saints run we saw in his rookie year, or the Charger run we saw in his rookie year, where they blocked it up right. He had a legit hole, hit the hole on time, and he was gone. And that's certainly a part of what he can provide you. It's there waiting beneath the surface of his game. But it's going to require a coach that understands how to put this kind of guy in the proper positions, which is don't use him like a bull, use him like the guy that can get on the outside and dance, use him for the speedster he can be. He's got some power to him, but you're not going to use him as a power back. That doesn't make any sense. And too many A gap, too many B gap, too many power runs for Kenneth Walker over the past couple of years, especially when you don't block it well enough up front to be leaning back on those runs. I'm expecting this year the Grub to go the opposite direction with it. I'm expecting him to love having a weapon like this to be able to utilize. And I think he's going to really build him into the passing attack as much as anything else here, where we really wondered with Walker coming out if he could be a guy that could be a pass catcher. Wasn't asked to do it at Michigan State, didn't have good quarterback play. He's proven as a pro, it's come on in his game that he absolutely can be a good pass catcher. I think he's even had a couple of really nice one-handers. So you can use him in that way out of the backfield too. The screen game's coming back into play this year. 1 in every about 8 plays, you're probably going to see a screen, sometimes a bubble, sometimes your traditional screen to Walker. But Walker will need to be maximized if you're going to be into a contending state this year. Not just simply you have a two-headed attack between him and Charbonnet, but him actually maximized for what he can give you. And I think we've seen a little bit of it. It's definitely been there in the first 2 years, almost 2,000-yard seasons back-to-back, but there's more there. There's more there, much like this next guy on my list, DK Metcalf. Same wording, same situation. DK Metcalf maximized. I think there are many pro Seahawks fans to DK who want to see him. I think the vast majority want to see him long-term here in Seattle. And I think that there is a small contingent that would say that that they'd be okay trading, but they're not quite involved. I think it's a much smaller contingent. Vocal contingent, but a smaller contingent nonetheless. I think all sides would agree, though, that the Seattle Seahawks have not maximized what DK can fully do at this point. And they've done that by kind of putting him into a box. Just be over here, and this is your little role you served, where so many other teams in the NFL look to move a guy like this around, look to find creative ways to get him the ball, and not simply just he's got to just beat sometimes double coverage. And if he doesn't do that, he's not getting the ball, or he's going to be put in a position where there's going to be an easy double coverage slanted towards him over the top, because you always know he's going to be over there as the X receiver on that side of the field. And so it's easy for defenses to kind of build around their doubling up of him in the amount that they do want to do that. Is once again, we have confirmed he was a top 10 double receiver last year in the NFL. Just another thing I like to go to these people that are anti-DK, where I'm like, well, you obviously, I guess, know more than these 31 other NFL defensive coaches, because they seem to be doubling this man at a rate that doesn't seem to fit to the narrative of how bad, not bad, but how limited some of those that are on that side of that make the argument of with him. But he is not limited. And it sounds like the coaching staff has also figured this part out, as we have Mike McDonald speaking about the fact that we're going to be working DK. He was gushing about him here pretty recently, which was good to hear. Hopefully a ringing endorsement at this part and putting to bed any trade rumors or any of that type of nonsense. And he says, I can tell you this. We want to get DK the ball a lot. And there was a mic'd up video I was watching of Geno Smith at OTAs with DK there. And he was kind of getting people in the right positions, as you're going to do with a new offense. No, you got to come in motion. No, you're on the outside. Oh, come inside. And he leaned over to DK and goes, DK, you're inside. And we saw for really the first time last year, the Seattle Seahawks, through 5 years of DK Metcalf's career, actually use him some within the slot. have a purposeful approach in how they used him in the slot. The Ravens game where you ran the cross or underneath, but you always ended up going back to that box. You always ended up putting him back in there, going, no, well, you're really just going to be, we're going to put you over there. And some of this was trying to get the most out of JSN and utilize the tight ends and get there's reasons for why they did it beyond just putting him in a box, but that's where you ended up putting him, and that was not then best suiting DK to be maximized. And I do believe that there is a great season in this guy, not a good season, not just a 1,000-yard season, not just he's a good guy, but I think there is a 1,500 yard season in here. And I think that while it's going to be hard for him in this offense with all of the targets to throw to get a guy into that spot, I also think the way that the Seattle Seahawks are going to look to utilize him will be a big part of making that potentially happen. And if you work to get a guy into space like this, like DK, it's going to make it so much harder on these defenses because they want to draw those doubles naturally, and they want the easy read of the double. He's on the X, run the trail coverage. We got the free safety. We'll peel over more often than not if we're in cover 2, or we flip it, and we've got the guy over there every time. We know it, but he's in the slot now. He's in a stacked bunch, and he's on the inside of the stacked bunch. Oh, man, it's hard enough out of just a bunch look just to identify who your coverage markers are going to be when you're trying to count it off. We're going inside out, outside in. And so you end up in a spot at that point where you're really going to put defenses in a bit of predicament. You're going to get DK one-on-one opportunities, and he's going to smoke them. He's also going to get more use, I think, on the inside, run more post routes, more slant routes. Anytime he's run those over the past couple of years, more often than not, it's been a bit like stealing candy from a baby for him. Been very easy for him to go take those and get open off those because, of course, the corners want to stay on top. Those routes open up because you're afraid of his speed. That's why it's it's good. I think that's one of the places his route running's improved on those kind of routes over time since he's come in the league, but it's also the corner wants to stay on top. So in-cutting routes open up. This is how teams have attacked our defense for years, in that we want to stay on top naturally no matter who the receiver is. Other teams want to stay on top of DK because of how dangerous he is out there on the outside and how much they go, I know I'm not as fast as this guy. I got to be 2 steps behind him to make sure I got the get up speed to catch up to him or he's going to run past me. And so DK maximized, Kenneth Walker maximized, your 2 pillars starting it out. What does this all go to? What is the bottom line on this? My other point to this, the sort of the wrap it up on this individual point and this kind of bow to these ones, because there's some other measures I'm going to bring in here, but I want to put these all together on purpose. And that reason is because the offense needs to explode. If the offense can explode next year, pillars at tackle, running back and DK, truly looking like difference makers at the position, and then have an assemblage of depth behind them that can help them, where it's not just all on them. You can really kind of work the ball around and through in the way the Grub wants to. The offense can explode if those pillars get set up. Because if the pillars can set up like they did through the first 10 games, 12 games, I believe it was maybe 10 games of not last year, but the year before. As we saw, that was an offense that had Geno playing at like an MVP level through those first 10 games. That's 10 games used at an MVP level. Not at like 5 games through, at 10 games playing at that kind of level. And then things dip down. But if those tackles can stay stable for a year out there on that side, and if the interior of the line can push itself up just above the spot of where it's been on this low water mark for years running now, where you just always seem on the inside to have a failing part, a worsening part, and an okay part. And that sort of just kind of fluctuates even game by game in the kind of performance you'll get by those 3 on the inside. If those can just stabilize a bit, they don't have to be even, to me, league average to get above the barrel where they've been. Just don't be in kind of a almost miserable state on things. Get yourself just a little bit above that. And I think this is where Grubb's offense is certainly going to help out, and getting the quarterback and the ball out of his hand very quickly at times and not putting these guys, on islands. But it's also going to be, I think, just the improvement of talent, having better guys on the inside that you can call upon, more pure fits to the scheme and what you want to do. Lucas Cross, come from spread systems, air raid systems in their college, going back to it now. Christian Haynes, best right guard mover in space in the draft, maybe the best mover in space in the draft as a guard, bar none. Bradford last year, one of the freakiest specimens you'll find out there as far as that athletic profile go. Look at his RAS numbers, like 9.8 or something, 98th percentile type athlete, I think, something around that name per thing. So starting to build out Oluwa team, he can do all that movement stuff space too. So now you're actually, instead before where you had with theoretically the Waldron Rams offense calling upon more mobility from the offensive linemen, and you really didn't have that. Blythe gave you kind of a little bit of it, and Brown, okay, but it wasn't there on the inside. Davian Lewis wasn't giving it to you. Phil Haynes wasn't giving it to you. Certainly not the Gabe Jackson that we had in here the year before wasn't giving it to you. So now you've got the guys that actually can operate within the scheme, that are fit to the scheme with their physical profile. I think it's going to hit. I think it's going to set. I think if you want to look at them getting to a contending state, I think they'll be good next year no matter what. But if they get to a contending state, it will be because they explode. And they will explode because these other supporting parts have come together in the way they have. That's going to benefit Geno, benefit the rest of the depth around with it. And then the offense can kind of carry a lot of the defense through, especially as it probably goes through the early part of its schedule, ironing out the kinks, getting things right. EJ Snyder, who I had on Bootleg Football, I had him on for an interview about a week and a half ago, pointed to the fact that he felt like this was not necessarily going to be as tough of an onboarding process with the defense, but it would certainly help the defense if the offense can come out and be that effective because they are so talented, because they are so good now. And this is as good as the offense has been in years. Hard to go find another time. And you're going to need a little bit of the talent to come forward. This is at the behest of this. The youth has got to come forward here to make this happen, but it is talented enough to do so. That's not in question here. These guys are good enough. It's just a matter of, is the time right? Will the seed break the soil? Will we get a bloom this season? We'll have to see on that. Next part on this for me is a big part of this is going to be a hot start to the season. And this is where we come back to the offense being good out the gate, giving the defense a little bit of time. I think the defense is going to be afforded overall when you go through about the first 7 weeks of the season. The defense is going to be afforded, I think, some benefits here to allow them to find their footing. First, the offense, I think, can make some hay against some of these defenses. You're going to get some rookie quarterbacks here, as we'll get definitely with Denver and New England, I would believe. We potentially will also get that with Atlanta. We'll see where they're at when we get to their spot of things. But when you do have a couple of tough games on here, Miami, San Francisco, those games are at home. Detroit's the real one tough game through the first 7 games to me that's really on the road. We'll see how Atlanta really is. I don't know if you guys are buying the hype on them or not. They'll be fine. It's not going to be an easy. I'm not saying they'll be an easy opponent, and playing them on the road especially. And I think that is a 10 a.m. game if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think that that's going to be as daunting as you look through kind of the rest of the schedule where you've got Buffalo, you're going to have the Rams twice, you're going to get Green Bay, you're going to get the New York Jets and potentially Aaron Rodgers. The Seahawks are going to get to contending state next year, and we're talking 12, 13 wins. We're talking to push for a division winner. You're going to have to accomplish that in jumping out to a 5-2, 6-2 kind of mark where you really give yourself with some chance on that back half of the schedule for a little bit of leeway. Because with all of those tough opponents, it's going to be hard to carve out there and say, well, you can go, 6-4 on the front end, and then you'll just go 5-5 or whatever on the back end, just kind of get up to that 10 win mark, 11 win mark, and think you're going to punch through there on that. So it's going to probably require getting it done early. First 2 games out the gate. Miami at home, that's going to be a tough one. Miami's no easy meal there, that's for sure. But you do get them at home versus playing on the road on that one. That's huge. Not a 10 a.m. game. That's huge. New York, we saw last year, we may be just kind of a tough matchup for them. I mean, we beat them the last, couple of years, haven't we? We haven't been exactly just an easy matchup for them in that side. And we'll see where San Francisco is. Detroit's not going to be easy. That's going to be a fun as hell game on Monday night. But you got to get a hot start here to the season. I don't see you coming out 3-3 and finding your way to contending status by the end of the season if you don't come out to a hot start as the schedule's kind of set itself up to allow you to do so, in my opinion. Next up, this one's going a little bit now to the defensive side of the ball. I think the defense is going to have its ups and downs this year in finding that footing with the new scheme, but it is so tremendously talented. I think even just getting to middle of the road with an offensive explosion can still push you to contending state. But that's only going to happen if the health of the inside linebackers is going to hold up. We got a recent Mike McDonald soundbite about the fact that both of our newly signed inside linebackers, Jerome Baker and Dodson, are dealing with health injuries right now that preventing him through OTAs. And I think even one of them, they're not thinking they're getting him back, I think, to like early August or something, I believe. So you're a little bit worried right now when you look at the depth chart as it stands, because behind these 2 guys, there's not a whole lot, or I should say there's not a whole lot, at least as far as that's been tested, tried, and true. It's a big fat question mark if one or both of these 2 guys go down. And I just don't see where you have that situation happen where either or, and that you have any of the backups you can call upon to go out there and that they're going to be able to maintain and hold the line and be able to get it done like the starters could get it done. Tyrese Knight has talent, and maybe Mike McDonald can work his magic on him in the first season, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time, probably a year, to be ready to be out there to really, truly compete to be a starter. Otherwise, he's going to get exposed if you put him out there. And John Radican, I don't know if he's got enough in the tank to get that done. I know some of you love Drake Thomas, but we just come back to that untested side of it. And if you have these 2 guys out, it's hard for me to see, even as good as Mike McDonald's been able to get his defense going, you to have this defense able to get itself to a middle of the road state. Because while Mike McDonald's been able to get by without the superstars within his defense, he did have Patrick Queen able to play a pretty good level there at will, and he was able to get Roquan Smith playing a really high level at the inside linebacker. You remove those elements from his defense, what happens to his defense at that point? Especially because the backups may not have that same kind of versatility as these two starters do, where in Jerome Baker and Dotson, you have two guys that have both played the will and played the mic, understand either duty, and have really a kind of full skill set to their game, where they can play the run, play the pass. They don't do anything great, but they all do pretty good down the line, all of their abilities within each of those capacities. And so you do lose that. Going to make it hard on the defense. It'll be straining the defense, I think, and potentially would maybe even push the Seattle Seahawks to have to make a trade at that point. But the inside health of the inside linebacker, as much as any position on this defense, is going to have to good up this year if the Seahawks are going to hope to get to a contending state. On that same note, in regards to the defense, the pass rush is going to be there. We got after last year. We got some good amount of pressures, good amount of sacks, did a good job with it. No doubt about that. But run defense has been a problem. Run defense has been the thing that has not been there for the last 2 years, and we've been kind of league worst at it. We've had times where teams can at will run against us, where we just don't have any answers, and they're just rolling right through us, and we know the run's coming. They know we know the run's coming, and it's going to be a 5-6 yard gain. And some of this is the defense wearing down at times in football games. This comes to, you look at Mike McDonald's scheme and hope that maybe a happy benefit of it out the gate would be, even if you can't really draw the defense up higher in its overall play, maybe you can get them off the field more often, get them with more of the 3 and outs, so that they don't have to be as much on the field for as long through the early part of the game, and then able to sustain as the game goes along, as opposed to just having those 2, 3, 14, 15 play drives that happen throughout the early part of the game, which then obviously leave them winded as it clicks into about 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. You start to feel that fatigue setting in on your defenders, where they've been on the field for too long. Your offense hasn't got enough done, and that's been a part of it. Some of it has been a bit of a lack of talent on the defensive line. They reshuffled through all their 4 guys that they had in the line from the prior year to last year, but it speaks to John Schneider and how he has hammered the position now to go out there and be able to bring in a Draymond Jones, trade for Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy as the pickup, bringing back Jaron Reed in here, Cam Young in the 4th round, who's a development guy that they hope can come along, and you're just fit in here as that backup to Jaron, be able to offload some of his snaps, be able to keep him balanced in that spot so that he can get it done to his on his side, not get wore down as the year goes along. It all has to work together. The inside linebackers' health has to work in there. Corners are going to need to tackle better. Guys like Trey Brown, Tariq Woolen. But the run defense needs to shore up. You're not going to be a contending team if we're going to be able to reach into week 10, 11, 12 of the season and see our defense in a place where, again, teams are just going to be able to go at them, go time and time and time again. I'm really not expecting this again because they're going to get off the field quicker. I think Mike McDonald has more at the forefront of an ability to deal with the run and some of the creative running concepts than the prior defense did. We'll have to see when it all goes live with it, but if you are going to be a contending team, hard to see them being, again, a team at even 24, 23 against the run, and seeing that as a team that's contending. Probably got to be into more of a top 15 state if we're going to get to that place of truly being a team at 12, 13 wins and vying for, be talked about in that way. And it is possible because they have actually reinforced the position. Go look at the depth chart of the Seattle Seahawks in 2022 on that defensive line, and go look at that defensive line depth chart now. And I think everyone would say that that's a pretty wide change from where they were before. And understandable when you look at before why they struggled. Oh yeah. Okay. You had this guy and that guy, and you were hoping Poona Ford was going to be your dynamic 3-tech pass rusher. Yeah, I guess I could see how that went down. Oh, you were leaning on 35-year-old Al Woods to save your butts inside? Yeah, I can kind of see how that defensive line just couldn't quite get it done there. That makes sense. That tracks. Next up, I think another part that's going to have to happen is if this defense turns into another World War I battle and everyone on every side is just running their howitzer. I don't know if it may none of us be a contender. Maybe just one of us survives. It's like Highlander, and they just eat all of the souls of the rest, and then they're able to be the best from that, whoever gets and carries through that. I do think this is where we need a little bit of Lady Luck to give us a little bit of a touch here. It's like, okay, a little magical touch from Lady Luck, and that is that you see one of the two entities, not both, but one of the two entities up there at the top, because if this turns into a kind of a bit of just war every week within the division, and it's very possible that it turns out to be that way because the division is looking like bare minimum right now. We're probably going to be at least the second toughest division in football, if not the toughest. But what helps contenders? What's a big part that aids them in their way? I've always said this for years. It's one of my pet theories. I call it the feast factor. And that is when you look at most teams that go out there and win Super Bowls, You can say you can point to your Brady's, you can point to your Mahomes. I point to the feast factor. And that is that you have a couple teams within your division that you're able to go through during your schedule of your year and be able to just get through those games because you're benefiting in the back that they're kind of falling down. Niners coming back after a Super Bowl loss. They are definitely deep into this Super Bowl window. In fact, they're longer into this Super Bowl window than our Seahawks had with the Legion of Boom. Damn near just about, feels almost twice as long a bit of a run that they've had at this chop. So they're definitely getting down to the end of it. You know, Trent Williams wants more money. Brandon Ayuk's doing this whole drama Instagram session with Jaden Daniels, I guess trying to get the Washington Commanders to trade for him. He's like, they don't want me. They don't want me, man. They don't want me. So they've got that to deal with. They've certainly are going to be kind of, I think, still very strong this year, but some issues at home still with the Niners. There's potential for them to fall down. And it looks like there's going to be a trade at this point. So the minimum, they're going to be a little bit weakened from where they were last year. It would seem like if one of those guys got to go, I call it the duck, goose thing, where you got Kittle, Debo, Brandon Ayuk. They understand they're going to have to pay Purdy in a year. They have to prepare for that. You don't deal with that a year out. You don't go, well, we're $38 million in dead money next year. We'll get around to it next year. No, you got to start to set the stage for that now. That negative $38 million you're looking at right now is going to start to need to be offloaded off the books. The thing that doesn't accomplish that is a $30 million a year deal to Brandon Ayuk. So somebody's going to have to go. They become a little bit weaker. What happens if a couple other injuries pop up? What happens if 36-year-old Trent Williams can't get all the way through another season? Or a guy like Kittle that's been beat up quite a lot through his year can't go through? Or Christian McCaffrey he's at that spot on his, and I'm not praying for injuries here. I'm just saying this kind of has to happen with us in this scenario to me is one of these, this also needs to pop up where a couple injuries hit that Niner team, a couple injuries hit that Rams team at just the wrong positions. This is true for a lot of teams out there, I think, but not every team in this way. And if those injuries hit, that it really does, I think, sink them down a good mark, that their strength and how good they are going to be relying on these key pieces towing the line. You look at the Niners and you say, they lose Fred Warner and Trent Williams. What does that do to the Niners? Do we still look at them as a top team in this division, as a contending team? I don't know if I would. I think that would change it pretty mightily for me. And the Rams in a little bit of a similar situation. Stafford, especially, you guys, every single year is banged up. Can he get through on it with his health? Are they able to just bounce right back off the Aaron Donald retirement like it's no thing? Are they able to just go, yeah, no problem. We can just get over that. We'll have to see. But I think if one of these two teams falters, that's going to be a bit of the part we look back on when we look at the end of the season. We go, man, we thought the Rams were going to be good and they ended up at 7 wins. Or we thought the Niners were going to be up at their 12 wins. They went up 8 wins. Not saying the teams fall completely off, but that they just drop back into that spot a little bit where it's just not quite as hellacious going through the totality of the NFC West in the way this year. We'll see with it. They're definitely lined up to be good teams, but I think that that's part of it. Last thing that's going to have to happen if the Seahawks are going to need to be a contender, I'm a big believer in this, and that is that the price of admission here in this day and age, as you come down the stretch, is more and more pushed and leans you into the direction of needing to make a go-for-it type move. Seahawks, of course, did this and miscalculated last year with the Leonard Williams, or you could look at through a different lens and say, hey, they brought Leonard Williams in as much to court him, to get him sold on the program so that they could retain him via free agency, and the plan worked. You could, say no to that, but that is the way that it did play out. I'm not sure that you would have got Leonard Williams here in Seattle if you had not traded for him. But look away from the Seahawks situation just to when you look across the NFL and at teams that have deemed themselves competitors. So what I say that we need to have at the beginning of this list, a hot start. The trade deadline has been pushed back in the NFL this year. The Seattle Seahawks have the full totality of their selections in the upcoming draft, and they're due to probably have 2 compensatory picks to also play with if John Schneider wants to work around here. Draymond Jones just restructured his contract in the last week. The Seattle Seahawks now have about $8.5 million to spend. Now, they don't truly have $8.5 million to spend because about $5.5–6 million of this is going to go to a reserve fund, which is injury releases you got to sign out. If you got to sign guys off the street because you run low on certain things, you got to have this sort of reserve fund that fans don't often think about. But you still will have about $3.5 million. We're talking about mid-year of a trade deadline, so it's a half a salary of a year, or even now because it's been pushed, I think, to week 10, you're pretty deep into the season to be able to make this kind of move and do something a little bit creative at that point. Not to mention we've seen in these deals at times, the Seahawks been able to pull off with general managers to get them to eat some of the salary, where you don't even have to take on the full onboard of the player's salary. They pulled this off recently with the Williams deal with the Giants, where we got the Giants to eat a portion of that contract. And then I think we also saw this with the Jadeveon Clowney contract when he was on the franchise tag, where in that deal, we got the Houston Texans to pay a portion, I think a good portion of his franchise tag on that contract that year. So you just need a couple $1 million in there to get it done. You got the draft picks to swing it. I don't know what position might open up that they could go out there and address. This is a little bit of a play it to the moment situation. But I think that if you're looking at the team getting to that contending state, John Schneider has already shown you in years past, Quandre Diggs, Carlos Dunlap trade. He understands this is kind of the price of admission now. This is a little bit of the looking at it through a bit of a new angle now with, how this should show up for people, I guess, because historically speaking, you would look at this if you're in 2012 and you say trade deadline deals don't work. It takes too much time to bring guys in for a program and get them up on the plays and all this, the chemistry, and you just don't get the benefits of it. You end up, paying for something you don't get the returns of. And I just say to that, it just depends on the position. Did the Rams get the returns for getting Odell Beckham in there late? Did they get the returns for getting Von Miller on a second and third round deal that they had to give up to get Von Miller? Yeah, they love that deal. For that was an amazing deal from their perspective of things at this point. Got to help to get them their championship, help to put them over the top. That's what these kind of moves do, help to potentially put you up over the top. I'm not advocating right now, but I'll tell you right now, if we're 7-2, I'll be advocating like a mofo. I'll be advocating right and left, saying, make the move. We're in the position we think you can get it. If these other factors have all happened that I just set the stage for, then go and make that move. Go out there and do something dynamic and see what you can do. Why not? And that's only if you can read it. And the nice part about this is you don't have to make the call like you did before 2 to 3 weeks prematurely. Last year, let's just take out the fact that we were courting them. Let's say it was just a trade deadline deal. Because I'm certainly guessing on this. Could come back to this and find out in retrospect. No, they didn't know if they were really going to be able to sign him. There wasn't really any thought to that. They thought they were that close. And that could be the deal. And if you had a couple more weeks last season to make that call, maybe you don't make that deal. You can be more instructed on the proper path you want to take. But same way, if they are deeper into the season next year when the trade deadline hits and in a position to strike with the extra compensatory picks in Schneider's back pocket, and especially if he feels like maybe the quarterback position is a little bit stabilized, not just both with Geno, but with Sam, in his trust of those two guys and the lack of need to package picks to go get a QB up in the draft, maybe you'll see him make a trade deadline deal. And again, he's done it many times over. So certainly not something that John Schneider is shy about doing. Last note, it's the forgotten part of the team, but it's the part of the team that could be coming back this year in a big effing way. The hardest mounts of Choco. And that is going to be the elite special teams. They are often forgot about, not remembered, often forgotten. But in Seattle, the special teams unit has been the most stable, consistent force on this team over the past couple of years. Michael Dickson could be argued as maybe the best start to a punter's career in NFL history. It's just been lost a little bit because he's a punter and people don't pay attention to punters. But punters are people and they matter. And Michael Dickson absolutely matters. He can flip a field. He can punt it inside the 20. He can give you hang time and depth. He is the 5-star tool prospect like you'd have in baseball at the punting position. And he has been absolutely fantastic on that side of it. Jason Myers is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, this is good news and bad news. The bad news is Dr. Jekyll's coming. There's no way around it. You will get Dr. Jekyll, and he sucks. Dr. Jekyll will break your heart. He's going to hit about 80% of his kicks. Best case scenario, maybe 75. A couple missed PATs in there. Probably going to miss a game winner at some point during the year. That's the Jekyll Hyde Jason Myers. Okay, that's the Jekyll. Now the Dr. Hyde, he's pretty effing awesome. He's great. And while it is bad news that you have to deal with Mr. Jekyll, Dr. Hyde's cool. And the good news part of it is that you can calibrate it like a clock with Jason. I don't know why. I don't know if it's maybe a deal he had to make with the devil to be a good kicker in the NFL. But it's just the way it plays out, which is if you track Jason Myers through his career, and it's like 10 years in now, folks, so we're not on sample size data here. 10 years in. Yeah. Good, bad, good. Well, it's actually more great, bad, great, bad, great, bad, great, bad, great. And the good news is you're flipping around next year to a great season. So we're going to have Michael Dickson punting his ass off. You're going to have Jason Myers being a sniper out there from the kicking position, able to hit the 50-yarders with ease, even in that stadium where it can be brutal conditions for kickers. And then we get the other added element brought into this, which is the Seattle Seahawks have maybe potentially taken a little bit of a hopeful leap forward from other NFL teams in their outlook a little bit at the new kicking rules, because with bringing back and still residing and keeping D. Eskridge here, and part of that move could be the hope that you could reclaim his second round status and eventually turn him into somewhat of a useful wide receiver. I think more of it is a little bit of the thought that the kickoffs are coming back this year, and they are going to be a part of the game now where they have been relegated to that redheaded stepchild aspect of the NFL recently, even more than PATs, where every NFL offseason there was a new rule to shutter it away because they were trying to remove the collisions. Well, now they've taken, I guess, with the UFL kind of kickoff rules here, and it may open it up to a lot of interesting nuances and turns that we're not expecting, because you have these special teams coaches having all of this offseason to sort of turn over in their head the various myriad of ways that they can attack utilizing these new kickoff rules. And it's coming back into play, and it's going to be a factor in games. And what the Seahawks have done now is with Eskridge last year, though it is a very small size, this would be sample size. He only had a couple returns last year, but he did have the highest kick return average of anybody in the NFL on those returns. So it was a sample size. He got injured again, as does happen. But he does bring at least that maybe bottom level ability. Whatever happens with him as a receiver, he maybe can bring that to the Seahawks. He has that instant acceleration, which should be the benefit to these new kicking rules, is the instant acceleration. The ability not to allow those, you got all these guys spread out wide and everybody's coming down like this, and it's going to take them a little bit of time to get to you. You got a little bit of a crack of light there to kind of go through. And if you got a guy that can just hit it and go, then he might have himself a little crack to get through before the rest of the help can kind of arrive. Some of this is just how we're going to have to see how they defend it. Do teams just kind of pull back and swirl it? It's going to be weird to see kind of, and I think there'll be some give and take between the two sides as they both kind of try to find their footing on this one. But having Eskridge with his kick return ability, and then Laviska Shenault, because as Eskridge was the top rated kick returner in the NFL last year, Laviska was number 2. Again, both guys not running a lot of kick returns, as for whatever reason with Laviska, teams just haven't used him as much in that part of his game. I thought that would be exactly what you'd be using for him coming out of Colorado. Him punt return, kick return, bubble screen, gadget guy. But he's not done a lot of it up until this point as a kick returner. He's got it in his game though, and he did a good job of it last year. So you got the top ranked, the top 2 kick returners from NFL last year, albeit though there's that sample size. You got the punter, you got the kicker coming into a good year. He's going to give you Dr. Hyde. And so that should give you an elite special teams. And if that gives you that, with the explosive offense and the parts within that explosive offense, I think that are key. With a defense with just certain specific spots holding the line. Inside linebackers holding up with their help. The run game getting shored up. I know our guys can cover on the outside. I know our safeties are going to hold the water. I know we can get to the quarterback. I know Mike McDonald's creative scheme is going to create sacks unto its own. It's going to create turnovers unto its own because he's going to confuse quarterbacks and get them to throw the ball early when they don't want to. That stuff's going to be baked within the bread. These other parts, I don't know. These other parts are going to be the big key here if this team is going to be that contending team for 2024. I will continue to push for patience. I will continue to say that I hope this team can stay in that pocket of just stay the process. We don't have to rush it. I'm going to advocate for a trade deadline deal, but that's only if we are running. That's only if we're starting to look like we can get out to lapping the competition, a little bit like, the Mariners are doing right now over there on the baseball side of it. And if that's the case, then I'm always going to be aggressive in those moments because you never know when you're going to be back in that spot again. So you got to take advantage, even if it's in the first season of a new coach. But it would take all of these things coming together, in my opinion, for this team to reach this state this season, to find that footing this year. It is possible, and it's possible because the unique standpoint that we sit on here, which is that Mike McDonald is walking into a room where he's got dogs in the room already. He's got a full house of players who can get the job done. It's not empty. He doesn't need to be like Carroll walking into this when he had Moore's roster that he inherited. You'd missed on the Aaron Curry pick. Lofa Tatupu's body was starting to fall apart. Offensively, Walter Jones is get done. You got just Matt Hasselbeck is kind of at the end of the rope in the line with him and what you have to do with him. You got a lot of big decisions and choices you had to do at that time, Carroll. And that's why they churned over that roster so much. That's not what is called upon here. And because of that, the potential of a great season does lie ahead for your Seattle Seahawks this year. I will push for patience. I'm not saying this is going to happen with some certainty, but I will say that these are all feasible things that I presented that can happen. And that's why I chose them specifically as I did, is I wanted to make sure I'm not picking for things that are, God's got to grant a wish and somebody's got to go find a genie in a bottle for those things to happen. Instead, let's make it into kind of hopefully a realistic spot for this to occur.